Question mark? JStone65 says, can I be formed? Baker 8150 says, sure. Question mark? Formed Baker 8. Elanova 777 says, okay. Cubanarafter joined the game. Question mark? Formed Baker 8. Cubanarafter says, hi guys. JStone65 says, alright. Cubanarafter says, this is a cool world. Question mark? Question mark? Cubanarafter says, what kind of RP are we doing? Question mark? Formed Baker 8. Cubanarafter says, so what about me? Question mark? Elanova 777 fell from a high place. Question mark? Formed Baker 8000. Question mark? Cubanarafter says, I feel neglected. Elanova 777 says, also I saw your YouTube channel. Cubanarafter says, probably the middle child, lol. JStone65 says, what did I say in the video? Question mark? Elanova 777 says, I just searched it up on Safari FR. Question mark? Form Baker 8001. Question mark? Question mark? Cubaniraptor discovered the floor was lava. Cubaniraptor says ow. Question mark? JStone65 says WSPMJ the best among us builder. Cubaniraptor says Braj. Cubaniraptor says are we 9? Question mark? Form Baker 8150 says like. Question mark? JStone65 says formed its recording? Form Baker 8. Question mark? JStone65 says can I say hi? Elanova 777 says oh nice. Form Baker 8. Question mark? JStone65 says WSPMJ the best among us builder. Cubaniraptor says Bratato is making a YouTube video for his 1 million followers. Elanova 777 says I have never been in a YouTube video. Cubaniraptor says LOL. Question mark? Cubaniraptor says we're famous. Question mark? Elanova 777 says JStone65 says okay. Cubaniraptor says I don't know what to do with all of this popularity. Question mark? Cubanarafter says Def the friend group leader. Question mark? Cubanarafter says I sat down and Evron followed. JStone65 says alright, what to do? Question mark? Elanova 777 says Dabadabito, formed Baker. Elanova 777 says Doobie Doobie Doo. Elanova 777 says do or do not? Question mark? Cubanarafter says hi guys, it's your Jay, and in today's video, question mark? Elanova 777 says we are gonna die. Cubanarafter says we are doing $1 versus $10,000 Minecraft mansions. Cubanarafter says you are. JStone65 says WSP guys, so today I'm going to show y'all how to make Among Us step by step. Question mark? Cubanarafter says my fiery. Cubanarafter says my one desiree. Question mark? Formed Baker 8th. Cubanarafter says believe when I say I. Elanova 777 says my fire. Elanova 777 says my desire. Cubanarafter says I want it that way. Elanova 777 says I eat my pants on fire. Cubanarafter says tell me why. JStone65 says WSP guys, so today I'm going to show y'all how to make Among Us step by step after that. Question mark? Cubanarafter says ain't nothing but a heartache. Cubanarafter says tell me why. Question mark? Cubanarafter says ain't nothing but a mistake. Elanova 777 says you're nothing but a mistake. Elanova 777 says ha 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 ha. JStone65 says tell me why. Question mark? Cubanarafter says I never want to hear you say I. JStone65 says command set. Title at P title subscribe. Cubanarafter says I want it that way. Elanova 777 says I want it that way. Cubanarafter says tell me why. Elanova 777 says yeah. Cubanarafter says bruh. Question mark? JStone65 says shy I'm going to talk. Cubanarafter says friggin' ear attack. mark? Cubanaraptor says guys the YouTuber is gonna speak. JStone65 says can I show the viewers something? JStone65 says can I show the viewers something? Cubanaraptor says thank God. Question mark? JStone65 says can I show the viewers something? Cubanaraptor says for viewers by the way. Question mark? Cubanaraptor says not including your mom. Formed Baker 8000. Question mark? Formed Baker. Cubanaraptor says tease is boring. JStone65 says formed him going to show the subscribers a step-by-step on how to make Among Us? Question mark? Elanova 777. Elanova 777 says PLS. Cubanaraptor says Bratato we are not in 2020. Question mark? JStone65 says bro they still like Among Us. Cubanaraptor says who? JStone65 says and nobody says Bratato. Cubanaraptor says okay. Cubanaraptor says you want a cookie. JStone65 says heck no. Elanova 777 says heard of the Linkero tragedy? Question mark? JStone65 says formed over here. JStone65 says formed him going to show the subscribers a step-by-step on how to make Among Us. Formed Baker 8100. Cubanaraptor says okay. I can get by 1 viewers. Elanova 777 says help. 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 Cubanarafter says but besides your mom, I did not know you had subscribers. Elanova 777 says help. Elanova 777 says help. JStone65 says first start with the red block 4x4. Cubanarafter says you're fine. Elanova 777 says help. Formed Baker 8. Elanova 777 says bivavrupt hvvhhffhtht. Question mark? Elanova 777 says hell. Elanova 777 says hell. Cubanarafter says you're fine. Cubanarafter says just can it. JStone65 says then make the body. Gave Enderpearl 90 to Elanova 777. Elanova 777 says tie? Question mark? Cubanarafter says the world ain't gonna end cause you we claustrophobic. Cubanarafter says in Minecraft? Question mark? Elanova 777 hit the ground too hard. Cubanarafter says LOL. Elanova 777 says I always come back. Elanova 777 left the game. JStone65 says and the body is 8x2. Cubanarafter says can I see the build or am I misbehaving? JStone65 says in the middle. Cubanarafter left the game. JStone65 says the other two sides are 7x2. Brook Kitty 8 joined the game. Formed Baker 8. Formed Baker 8. Brook Kitty 8 says hi. Question mark? Sediment 2843 joined the game.